Hey, thanks guys for joining us on another lovely day and another episode of the Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. Today we are doing another series called our election series where we dive down into candidates and their candidacy and their campaign and what's making them run and all the good things behind that. And today, for our first guest, we have Andrew Rosales, who is running for county commissioner here in Douglas County. And, right now I'm just going to be real generic and we're just going to ask some questions about who and why you're running. And then we're going to dive into the potatoes because I know you've had a really interesting campaign and I'm sure some people want to ask some questions about it. So,
Yeah,
my first question is, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running. And then I'm going to go into who you're running against and why you chose to run against them.
sure. My name is Andrew Rosales. I moved to Douglas County at the right at the end of 2023. And the reason why we did that is because I fulfilled a 21-year military career in the Air Force, and I retired out of Oklahoma. My wife and I are both, well, we didn't like Oklahoma. It's a little flat. We wanted some mountains and we wanted some nice weather and just a little change of scenery. We actually took a road trip for a couple weeks, and we traveled around the Western United States, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, and Utah. And out of all those places that we visited, only one like just really, really touched our souls, and that was right here in Douglas County. So we moved here, absolutely loved it, and decided to put down roots. Like I just said, we haven't really put down roots before then because I was in the military and we moved every few years. Um, so some of the places that I've been in during my military career, because that's always kind of interesting to talk about if we want to talk about it later too, is that I started out in Oklahoma and then went to Alaska, back to Oklahoma, went to Oklahoma a lot, and then California, and then back to Oklahoma. And those were my main bases. But I was also TDY a lot and deployed several times. In fact, I was just going over my DD 214, which is your retirement paperwork whenever you get out of the military. And my overseas dates was 3 years, 9 months, and 14 days. So lots of times over there.
That's quite a stint.
Yeah, yeah. It's not one stint, it's many stints, of course, in that type of world. So but the reason why I'm running is because once I got here and decided to put down roots and started talking to people and getting to know people, I noticed that there's some things that were just kind of off about the local government. So I just did a little bit of digging. You'll notice about my personality. I was a program manager and an engineering supervisor for a long time. So whenever I see an issue, I feel the need, like a compulsion to go figure it out and figure out the issue and then try to fix it. And the first thing I did in this issue was look at the county budget because the budget's always the best place to start. And as I started looking at the budget, it was right at the end of spring, so it's right about the time that they're approving the budget and getting things ready. I noticed some of the things in the proposed budget that didn't make a whole lot of sense. You know, like a mysterious $30 million just showing up out of nowhere that they couldn't account for, and then the fact that there was a $30 million deficit. So there's just some questions. And I should circle back just a second and say the reason why I feel like I have the experience to look at these budgets is because whenever I was with Boeing as a program manager, I was managing much larger budgets in the order of billions of dollars and teams that consisted of thousands of people. So the Douglas County budget, I think, was roughly 130 million last year, and I believe the headcount was somewhere in the 500. So even though that is a large organization, it wasn't so much data that I couldn't digest. So looked at it, saw those issues, emailed one of the county commissioners, emailed all of the county commissioners, and crickets. So gave it a few days, emailed them back, and to Chris's credit, Chris Boice, he was the only one that even attempted to talk to me. But his email was a bullying email, basically saying that they don't know who I am, and maybe I should just leave governing to the governors, right? So I wrote back, explained that I was in the service and that I worked for Boeing and I understand budgets. I'm not just somebody trying to throw a fit. I have some actual legitimate concerns. And then I got back was we can talk about this, but we can talk about this after the budget passes. which again was a big no-no to me. And then, so I wrote an op-ed kind of explaining my displeasure. And then the next time I went to one of those meetings, it was a full-throated, what the hell? How dare you? How dare you question us in our infinite wisdom? So, yeah, that was a
Well,
lot.
I guess that kind of explains why you're running, but
Right.
I guess that who are you running against specifically, you know what I mean? And what position and why did he piss you off enough to run for that position? I'm trying to
Yeah,
be I know the specifics, but I'm trying to be generalized for the audience here. Sorry.
I know, absolutely. So I am running for Douglas County Commissioner position 3, which is against Chris Boice. Again, Chris was the only one that had enough uh, give a shit factor, I'll call it, give a care factor to even email me back. So, give a little bit of credit where credit is due. But he emailed me back to try to bull me out of actually talking about the issues I want to talk about. So that wasn't real fun. You know, why did it piss me off? That's almost a little bit of a philosophical question. And it is this. Um, you know, it was 21 years of my life, 3 years, 9 months of being overseas, of being away from my family, of not pursuing the things that I wanted to pursue, because I thought that I was protecting the Constitution. I thought that there was an order, and I thought that you could petition your government whenever you saw some stuff that was messed up. And it really gets on my nerves and fires me up, as you can see, that you can dedicate that much to a system and then the system tell you that you don't matter. And frankly, why should I have to serve in the military? Why should I have to do that? That government is supposed to work for us and work for the people. And for too long, the government here in Douglas County has been working around the people and working for themselves. And Kevin, I got to be honest with you. As we started doing these town halls and talking to folks, it is so blatant that, as you can see, I'm usually a very calm and methodical, thought out person, but there's just, issue after issue after issue that would be front page news anywhere else. I made just a little bit of a list last night. Let's talk about the landfill. The landfill here in Roseburg, they put a bunch of drywall into special favor. You'll notice there's a bunch of these special favors. And then the Jimson started to release this leachate that was killing the bacteria that actually cleans the water. To the point that they went, and this is a little bit of hearsay, but we'll take it for what it's worth. I trust the people who are talking to me about it. They took the water over to Sutherland because that's where they were processing it, and it actually killed all the bacteria in their treatment facility at one point because of this leachate that was in the drywall that they allowed this company to dump a hotel and all the drywall into the landfill for free, for free. Number one. That's just one. Salmon Harbor. Salmon Harbor decided to extend their footprint and put in some more spaces, apparently. And then they needed to tie into the sewage system because that's a lot of more sewage when you have more visitors. Tied into the sewage system, didn't let the local treatment plant know, overwhelmed the system, shut it down, and now we're having to pay for that. Next thing, landslide. There's Mill Creek Park up here on Callahan Ridge. They decided to mill it, even though the residents at the bottom of the hill petitioned and said, hey, this is a high, high, high landslide area. If you clear cut that, it's going to come down on top of us. They did it anyways. Then it came down on top of them. So then they went back to the county and said, hey, can you please at least help us clear this road? And the county said, absolutely not, not our problem. That was weather caused. Let's keep on going. $175,000. Would you believe that one of your county commissioners has received $175,000 in campaign contributions since 2018 for a county commissioner seat? And if you take a little bit of time to research who donated that money, it's a family that owns Sutter Home Wines and 10 other massive wine companies. And they're out of, guess it, Napa Valley, California. So, I have to ask myself, why would our wine industries and our tourist industries major competitor be donating $175,000 to one of our county commissioners? I'm not going to say what it could possibly be because you guys are smart enough to figure it out. That constant bullying is over the top, and it just goes on and on, Kevin. You've been here longer than I have. You know all too well.
Well, I mean, from personal experience, my aunt is Rita Harris, and she ran against I think who was it, Tim Freeman or Chris Boice, Betsy, that she ran against in 2018. And although I don't know who she was running against, I do remember the League of Women Voters debate where Chris Boice came up to her afterwards because she was driving in her van. I was in the caravan at the time, and he said,
Yeah.
you know, you don't make enough money. Why should you be a county commissioner? You don't have the experience when she was working over and teaching social studies for special needs students out at Wolf Creek at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, let me talk about money real fast because that's another thing here that just makes me crazy. The amount of money that is in our local government is grotesque. I mean, it is just over the top. And I mean, by geographical size, we're a big county, but by population and by budget, we're not that big. And the amount of money is crazy. Um, I want to start a process of taking some of that money out. And I'm going to make a pledge right here. I made it last night and I'm going to start making it at every campaign stop and everybody will listen to me. If I'm elected, I will donate $30,000 of my salary to local charities, local nonprofits until which time that salary is reduced to something that's logical and reasonable because $118,000 to do a part-time job, it shouldn't be a part-time job. They treat it as that is ridiculous. So, yeah.
And is that just like the salary, the 118,000, or does that like include the benefits or shit like that? Because I know they get like, or all the retirement and health plan and all that
Yeah.
stuff too.
That's a great question. Whenever you go and look at their department's budget, itemized budget, their department consists of four people. There's the three county commissioners, and there's one office assistant that helps them out. That budget is $800,000. So I know if you do the math, 120 times three doesn't even get close. But because of the PERS system, the PERS system is almost 100% add on to the salary to pay into the Oregon system. So yeah, it's actually double that, plus a little bit.
Well, that is ridiculous. So, well, I want to deep dive into the budget right now because that's what
Mhm.
inspired you to run, and that's obviously, what you're really
Yeah,
specializing in my opinion. You're doing a great job talking about the mismanagement of the county funds. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so, I would like to speak a little bit about that as the parks and the investment that is coming out of the park system because. Last time I saw a Parks Commission meeting anyway in Douglas County, they were bragging that it was self-sufficient and the only way that I did that was from selling it. And so I just wanted to, talk a little bit about your county philosophy when it comes to, public resources and the maintenance and the funding that comes behind all that too.
yeah. Yeah, it we could dive into the line items, but that's a little maybe a little nerdy. I'm a nerd and I love doing that kind of stuff. But I'm going to frame this in a little bit different. There was a question asked. We had a town hall last night, and somebody asked the question. The county is in a bit of a financial crunch. A lot of that was alleviated temporarily. Let me say temporarily because SRS funds were reinstalled, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But the question was, if we know we're in a budget kind of crunch, what are we going to do to help revenue? Um, and here's the truth, in my opinion, there's not a whole lot we can do to help revenue right now, especially at the county commissioner level. You could always have a talk. I think it was Josephine County. They did an interesting levy where they were able to do a levy just for public safety. It may not, it may be Jackson, maybe Josephine, don't quote me on the county. But they did a levy that allowed them to fund their public safety through that levy and pull it out of their general funds and their specific funds. And that would be one way we could move forward to a lot to free up some of that budget. But honestly, it, putting a new tax on folks isn't the right thing to do right now because affordability is such a crisis. So what has happened is we've worked ourselves into a position where we can't increase revenue and we're overspending and there's not a lot of options. The only real thing we can do is look at the budget, look at what needs to be funded, what our actual priorities are, fund those, and then what is ever left, we invest that into things that are going to grow our local economy. If it's daycare to ensure that small businesses can operate during the day and that generates jobs, then that's something they can do. But it's almost like we got to start from the foundation up and start building a new economy and start adding to the tax base. And that's the solution long term, is to build our tax base through new businesses and through new homes and property taxes and that type of thing. Um, but we can't do that right now. So it is going to be a bit of a process.
Well, you were speaking about some of the examples Josephine or Jackson County was, given out. Or are there some other interesting ones you've seen out in the state of Oregon, or maybe even not even in Oregon, in the state and in the United States in general? Have you seen that could be interesting to be implemented in Douglas County?
Yeah, there's the thing that I'm really interested in growing the economy. One of them just popped up, and it's a little bit different, and it's a little bit of a new idea. So a little bit of feedback. Kevin is actually good on this one. Um, and it is this, and I wrote an op-ed to the news review, and it should be coming out soon. So you can expand on that whenever that comes out. But the idea is that ONC land is right now going through a purpose and use rewrite. And what ONC land is basically used for right now is, the BLM will say we want to log this area, and then they'll say we're going to do it in this type of cut, whether it's a clear cut or thinning. And then they put out their contract, and then companies bid on it, and then somebody wins, and then they go and do the work. And that's great because it funds the local government because the local government gets 75% of that bid, right? But what if we flip that around just a little bit? And what I'm suggesting is that if on that purpose and use, if we wrote in there that job creation was going to be the number one deciding factor on contracts whenever they're bid, then that opens up a whole different way of looking at what is good and bad for the local community. For instance, thinning is always going to be more labor intensive. It's always going to be less efficient, and it's always going to take more people. It's always going to take longer, and it's always going to create more jobs. So if we're really talking about creating jobs, then maybe those contracts should be written in a way that creates more jobs, right? In that thinning aspect. Now, what are the side effects of that? Yeah, our local government wouldn't get the same amount of funding because the only way that the timber industries could offset that excess labor cost is by bidding a lower stumpage fee. But if our government is there to help the community, shouldn't job creation be one of the very first things the local community is trying to do? Seems simple to me.
Yeah, I'd have to give more research into that because I'm not a Langman. I just come at these podcasts as a undiscerning working class young man. You know what I mean? But I
Yeah.
could definitely see that. Betsy, you're my expert here. Do you have any thoughts on what Andrew just said, or would you also have to do more research?
Well, I think just at an initial reaction, it's, that displacement of money, wealth. I mean, it's a redistribution of income, but it
Yeah.
goes into the pocket. So if you're talking about county services, it would seem to
Yeah.
me that would certainly potentially fund it because you
Yeah.
have jobs. And so people are paying more taxes, property taxes. And so certainly, particularly if they're
Yeah.
living wage jobs, if that were also the criteria, not just any job, but living
Absolutely.
wage jobs, and benefits, of course. Timber
Yep.
industries and particularly, these trusts might make less money, but too bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
We, there
Yeah.
needs to be a forceful way to improve the working life of Douglas County residents because right now that's what is the county minimum wage? If I'm not mistaken, it's like
Great.
13.50, and I mean
It,
that's abysmal.
it's 1405 is what it is for this rural. That's the lowest minimum wage in Oregon, 1405.
That's crazy. If you think about that, 1405, that's not even $30,000 a year. And I think like the lowest rent you can find around here is, five, $600, and that's for one room. It's impossible, right? It really is an impossible gambit right now for especially for our younger folks that don't have any type of background or nest egg to fall onto. And even as I say that, I'm realizing, it's maybe it's even worse for the older folks that are, don't have any working life in front of them, but it's just it has gotten out of hand. And what I hear a lot from the current county commissioners, from all of our government, honestly, is that you say, well, what if we do this? And then they go, well, that's not in our purview. Well, what if we do that? Well, that's not my job. And all I can think is like, if it's good for a local community, if it's going to be good for the most of the people, and it's a known issue, then whose job is it if not the county commissioners, if not our elected officials? One thing that drives me crazy is that I often hear that we can't build because, the zoning laws are crazy. But then I'll hear this from our state reps and senators, and it's like, well, don't you guys help write laws, and don't you guys help draft those land use? So I really want our elected officials, and I will only vote from now on for elected officials that are going to stand up and say, I will take ownership of every single problem that is brought to me and do my damnedest to solve it and come to a good resolution. This not my problem crap needs to go away quickly.
Well, I appreciate that. So, Betsy, do you have any questions really quick?
I guess just, do you have some kind of like three top points of things that you're focusing on your campaign?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's three things that I really want to concentrate on. The one thing that I think could help that rebuilding process start is housing. Um, and it'll take a lot of work, but Douglas County has a lot of advantages in that area. If we start doing those O&C contracts like I just talked about and saying, hey, we're going to employ these folks, then those folks will probably have a little extra money in their pocket to actually buy homes. I hear what you're saying about the minimum wage, so we'll circle back to that in just a second. In every other type of government work, there's a thing called like a minimum government wage at the federal level, and that is well above the $14 an hour. And there's no reason that couldn't be included in those contracts. But don't quote me on the amount. Now, those contracts would be further strengthened by saying that any wood that is, lumbered in that county, because, not all O&C land is in Douglas County. So any wood, any lumber that is cut in Douglas County will also get a priority contract if it's milled in Douglas County. So once we get that up and running, we'll have the lumber, the material to build houses. UCC and the Job Corps are chomping at the bit to have opportunities to take their students out into the railroad and train them. So you can have a skilled labor workforce come up pretty quickly, and then we can just start building houses. They have to be cheap houses, right? And I think we can do that through a city, county, state partnership. And the details will have to be worked out. But in general, the goal should be to try to build houses under 200,000. The reason why I say 200,000 is because whenever you do look at the median income of Douglas County and then you use the 30% rule, generally that's what most financial folks will say is that housing should be 30% of your income. That's where that 200,000 comes from. It's always going to, vary a little bit depending on interest rate, but that's what we should be shooting for. The only way that I think we can do that in Douglas County is if cities, for lack of a better term, create lots ready to build, lay the infrastructure, lay the electrical, lay the gas lines, the plumbing, maybe not the gas lines, but lay the infrastructure down, lay the roads and get it ready. And then we can work deals with those local lumber companies because it's the lumber capital of the world. We should be able to build houses, right? And then get some of that labor in that's homegrown right here in Douglas County and start building some houses. And then the state can chip in, with some cash or something. The details will need to be worked out, but there are definitely methods and ways that we can do it as long as there's a will and a desire. I guess that was one. A little fast for one. That really builds on number two. Number two is self-reliance. Um, y- you'll hear me talk about my military service a little bit, um, but freedom is my core ethic and principle. You know, everybody should be able to live as free as they want. And to be able to do that, you need to be self-reliant as much as possible. And what I mean by that is that if you're dependent on somebody to give you money or to provide you favors, or you need the state to give you this or that, then you're not really free to make your own decisions as a community. You have to live within those parameters. So if we can grow our own economy and we can build our own tax base, then, we can start not being so reliant on the federal government, on, SRS funds, on ONC money. We can build it here and take care of ourselves, which allows us to make our own decisions. So that's a big one for me, self-reliance. I do want to work on that on the family level. I whenever I say self-reliance, I do mean that on a personal level, on a family level, on a community level, on a county level, on a state level, right? And that's just a promotion of freedom in my book. The third priority is kind of goes along with the same kind of housing concept, and that's homelessness and crime. Those aren't related in that the homelessness are doing the crime. I just think that those are two issues that are kind of creeping up in the local community. Homelessness has been an issue for a very long time. For me, it just seems like anecdotally, and I'd need to do research to actually confirm, but it looks like the crime is getting a little out of hand. So we definitely need to figure out what's going on there, confirm my observation, and if it is, take some steps to mitigate it.
Well, then let's circle back to what was it, the SRS funds that you were talking about, because I think we should talk about some of these things and not let them get too far out. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, so SRS funds. We'll do a little bit of a history lesson, and it won't be exact. Again, I don't have my notes in front of me, so this is all from memory. So, at one time, the county made just a ton of money from timber receipts out in the forest. And then eventually, there's a few things that happened and knocked it down, da 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 da. And the counties really started to suffer because they weren't getting the same revenue. So the federal government stepped in and said, okay, we're going to supplement these counties that were harmed by a court ruling that reduced the logging. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to provide them a certain amount of funding for a certain amount of years to transition their economy to something new. And that was in the 90s. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was in the 90s. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong there. So for the next 30 years, from the 90s to now, we've been working on starting to develop a transition plan, I guess. I don't know. There hasn't been a transition plan, right? They've just been using the money for whatever they wanted to. And Congress eventually got fed up with it, and they pulled the funding 2 years ago. It languished there with our senators and our representatives working real hard to get it back from the federal government. They finally did get it back this year. I believe it's going to be 50 million over the next 2 years, and that helps out. But that's not a constant funding source, and it's supposed to transition us to another economy. So, while I welcome the payments, if it doesn't actually come with some action, we're just going to be right here in the same spot in 2 years.
All right. So I think that's enough deep diving on a budget. Now I wanted to ask about, I wrote down the four kind of things that really pissed you off and inspired you to run, the special
Yeah,
favors, Salmon
yeah,
Harbor, the landslide harbor, and, $175,000 from the wine company. So we're going to go down and each
yep.
of those and kind of have you explain to the audience about what's happening and why those pissed you off and why they need to be taken out. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. So we'll just start from the top, the most recent one to the least one. So, sitting in my car the other day, and I get a phone call, answer it, and I can barely understand what the gentleman is trying to tell me, and it's a very very elderly old man. Kind of gives me some pointers, and he's talking about Champagne Creek, and he's like, it's by my land, blah, 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 blah. He had some issues with it. Again, I couldn't really understand what was going on. So I went into my office, started doing a little bit of research, and this is what came out of it. Basically, the county at one time, or some folks in the county, decided that it would be nice to have an HOV park up there, which maybe it would be, it'd be awesome. And then they use it for search and rescue too. So it's a good location and a good thing. Just the way that it came about is shady. And I am meticulous, and I do think that you have to work through the process. So back to what happened. So they decided they wanted this, and then the local community stood up and complained and started going to the county commissioners meetings and saying, "We do not want this. We live there. It's right in our backyard. We don't want it." And they were able to put a stop to it. Yay, victory! You petition your government, and the government listens, and that's how a democracy works. Um, unless there's a nonprofit company that the county commissioners can then take that piece of land and give it to, and then just circumvent the whole democratic process, throw out the will of the people and just say, we think this is a good idea, and it doesn't matter what you think, you'll realize it's good once it's there. And that's just, your government should work for and with the people, not around the people, even if it's the best thing in the world. The way you do it is you follow the process. And the reason why that's important is because what happens when it's next to your house and it's a prison? What happens when it's next to your house and it's a motocross track? You see what I'm saying? Like, this may have worked out and been a really good thing for the local community and a few folks, but the way that it happened is wasn't the will of the people, right? So that's my problem with that one. The landfill thing, I think we kind of went through already in detail. So what else was it?
Sorry, I muted myself. Salmon Harbor and the landslide issue, because I've been hearing about those, but I think I should, especially the landslide issue, I heard a lot about.
Yeah, the landslide issue. We're gonna go out with the young lady that contacted me about it and actually do a little tour of her land and look at the landslide. So again, take this with a little bit of grain of salt. I haven't been out there and I haven't done a whole lot of research on this, but this one doesn't seem to need a lot of research. Basically, there was a small city patch of land up on the Callahan Ridge above some folks' homes. And I believe it was called Mill Creek Park. Does that sound right?
It
Yeah.
does. Betsy might do it. That does sound familiar, right?
Yeah, I don't know, but I think it's county property.
County property. There you go. Yeah, you're right. Thank you for the correction there. Um, they decided that they were going to log it, clear cut it. The residents at the bottom of the hill came together, petitioned their government, went out and said, "Hey, we have some real concerns here. Our property's under there." I believe she said they actually hired whoever does the analyzation of the terrain to see if it will slide or not, to come out and look at it. And they said, "Yeah, this is a high potential for a landslide area." The county disregard, that's kind of been the MO, ended up doing the clear cutting anyways. And then lo and behold, not too much longer, we have some heavy rains and a landslide happens. The landslide happens. Initially, the county did come out per their story and started to clear the road, and then they just disappeared. And whenever they called, they were basically told that they're not allowed to help those people anymore. And whenever they tried to petition their government again to say, "Hey, can you come help us?" They basically just said, "No, that was an act of God. The clear cut had nothing to do with it. It was just the weather." Even though those trees were what, 150 years old, there hadn't been a landslide in 150 years. So there you go. So yeah, and unfortunately, they did look into suing. Um, the way our legal system works, the lawyer said if somebody would have died, this would have been a great case. But because there wasn't an actual injury or a death, that there's just not enough money to make it practical.
Makes sense. And well, that's in one issue that I can tell is really firing you up. And here's one that's
Yeah.
near and dear to my heart because I live out on the coast and I have to experience the influx of tourists every season. So, let's talk a little bit about Salmon Harbor and some of the issues surrounding about that.
That's another one of those things where it's the same MO every single time where, there's this great idea that comes, who knows where it comes from, but it ends up with the county commissioners and they become champions of these ideas. And once those ideas are in place, it doesn't matter who's against it. It doesn't matter if we, the citizens, care or want to make a difference or want to change it. They're just going to push it forward. So, in this particular incident, again, this one, is anecdotal at best. I've heard two or three stories about it, but I haven't actually dug into the money yet. I do have a contact over there that's doing the research for me, and we can give an update at some point, Kevin, and say what we found here. But the genesis is that Salmon Harbor expanded at one point, and then at that point they decided to go ahead and tie their sewage line from the dump station into Winchester Bays. Is that right? Winchester Bay?
At Winchester Bay.
Yeah. Yep, Winchester Bay's sewage system. And in doing so, overwhelmed the system, caused some damage. Now the county's on the hook to fix that damage for doing that. At the town hall last night, I actually heard that there may be an EPA investigation going on because you're not allowed to tie into septic systems without notifying the utility company, right? That you're going to tie into their system. It's an EPA violation. So if they truly did that, there could be a sizable fine coming as well.
Well,
You
and
know,
it's just a continued example of that. My most recent my thing that I think you should maybe talk about and do some research on is the Oregonian investigation that they were doing in regards to records. That was a big deal that the Oregonian was about to sue Douglas County until they settled. So I'm not sure if they settled or what was the deal behind all of that, but I do know for quite a while the Oregonian was running some stories because it's cost prohibitive to get any kind of public information request, which you've experienced, if I'm not
right.
mistaken.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to see, because you always hear rumors, right? And that's for any elected official. Just because you hear a rumor about an elected official doesn't mean it's true, right? There's always going to be people out there talking crazy. So it's always important to do some research and understand. It just so happens that every time somebody tells me something, I start doing the research and it's just like, yep, 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 and it all clicks off. Um, but so the information that I requested in particular is that there was some ethics investigations that happened with our county commissioners in regards to their travel to DC. I wanted to understand that a little bit better. And then I also have heard that sometimes one of our county commissioners has an airplane. And sometimes when they fly other people around to kind of show them the area that they charge, maintenance and fuel costs back to the county. So I would be real interested to see if that's happening as well. But the ethics investigation, you all may have a little more information on that because I think that was before my time.
Betsy, do you remember that? It was back in like 2018 after the election, when my Aunt Rita ran. Are you there, Betsy?
Yeah, I was rambling, but my mic wasn't on. Yeah, it was 29, it was 2020, 2019, 2020, when the Oregonian was complaining about the reluctance to provide records from the without, and then they wanted over $2,700 in fees. And interestingly enough, for the Southern Oregon Progressive podcast, not this coming Sunday, but the following one, which I believe is the 15th, we're going to do a public records and meetings law and talk about, because it's Sunshine Week, which is not because it's getting close to spring, but because it's about public records and information, the federal FOIA stuff. Um, but that has been a problem even when the local news years and years ago. Brian Prouts, who no longer even lives in this community, but many folks might know him from various things. He worked for the radio station and was having a battle with the county commissioners, and this was shoot in the, it might have been before 2020, trying to get records, and it was about the use of their cell phones. And so
Yeah,
it's really important for any kind of democracy to, have
yeah,
access to public records. I've never
yeah,
had, well, once in a while I get denials of public records, and there's recourse, but
yeah.
it's also can be very expensive if you're not poor.
I want to say something about that real fast too, in the bullying. I've had a few times where these folks have alluded to the fact that they're going to sue me about the things I'm saying. I just want to make really clear that I don't think they understand the discovery process and what that actually opens them up to, if they sued me. So I actually look forward to being sued because then we can get some lawyers and we can really start digging through their data and understand what was happening in the background. So, for any of those folks out there that are going to threaten to sue me, let's do it. I'm on board for sure.
Well,
Yeah,
then,
the period civil
no, please.
litigation that, I help lawyers with it. Actually, you can get more documents than you can under public records request when you
Right.
sue somebody or being sued.
Right. Yep, yep, absolutely. So they do that tactic. There is just straight bullying that happens. We're also going to do a video with a one of our friends of the campaign, Diane, up in the South County, down in the South County. This is actually one of the reasons too that really just kind of chaffed me a little bit. There was I don't remember if it was a county commissioner meeting or if it was just a town hall last year, but whatever reason, Diane pissed Chris Boice off and he trapped her at the bottom of a stairwell and chewed her out to the point where she said that she, was physically shaken, felt like she was going to break into tears, all just because she disagreed with him. And I mean, this I don't get it. I don't know why they feel like they can just bully people into being quiet or to not talking or I'm going to call this person to have them call that person. Like I don't want to be your friend. I want to work hard for this county. I want to make sure that our people get what they should be getting out of the government and that if they want to change the direction of the government, we'll at least listen to them and not just blow them off. So, oh man, the US is the greatest government and the greatest nation in the world. I truly believe that if if we have leaders that actually believe in the Constitution and actually follow the more unethical code, as we should, any system's going to be susceptible to pieces of shit. It's true. And we as the people need to stand up and make sure that we're putting people in office that are going to work for our best interest.
100%. I think, and that's one of the reasons why I enjoyed having Patrick Starnes on here the other day, because I mean, money in politics, and this is my next question about the Sutherland Vineyards people is, it makes our elected leaders dirty. And in regards to your vow to reduce your salary and donate most of it until the salary is reduced, I applaud you for that, because you're right. I think the certain benefit that state legislatures have, for example, they're only paid like 20 something thousand, $28,000. I enjoy that because that encourages them to have a part-time job or have a job or connect with their community. Because, if you're just staying away in Salem, or you have, your big pie in the high streams where you're not really connecting with the people, it's like, well, what bothers you?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
no,
that
it's
goes to my next question, which is, you've done the research on this one, so what's Sutherland getting from their donations, you think?
so it's not Sutter Home in the Trinchero family. You can't you can't get into somebody's head, right? You can only look at the data and the facts that are in front of you and surmise what is the most likely option. There's certain ways I don't want to get myself in legal problems. I can't tell you what their actual intent is. The only thing we can see is that they are giving a ton of money to one of the county commissioners. We know that Douglas County has a yeah, God, fledgling wine and tourism industry. Is that even the right, you adjective? I don't even know if it's fledgling anymore. It's a little less than that. And it doesn't seem like our elected leaders really want to invest anything into that industry or into tourism. And you have to ask yourself why. Like, why? It's good for the county. It's going to bring more money. It's going to bring more tax dollars. So why are we working to try to stop that instead of helping it? And whenever you start looking at some of the stuff, you can make up your own opinion about why. Um, yeah, the money is crazy. So someone explained it to me the other day in a way that finally made sense of like what is this thing they're doing? I don't and Betsy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been a very long time since there's been a non-incumbent elected to any position in Douglas County. It's kind of already kind of picked out, and then somebody retires, and then somebody is what's the word, appointed to that position. That way they never have to run as a non-incumbent. And running as a non-incumbent is vastly more difficult than running as an incumbent. So the trick once you get into the once you get into the that group, that good old boy system, right? Is that you want to make sure that your last years working for Oregon, you're working as a county commissioner because that's the highest paid position. And your retirement out of the Oregon retirement system is based on your last pay, a certain amount of years of your last pay. So there's, a really big incentive to having this pipeline of folks that are going to be virtually taken care of the rest of their life because they found a way.
Sounds like Marjorie Taylor Greene when she retired from Congress right after she started getting her pension. You know what I mean?
Isn't it?
Right.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tom Tillis, this is going off on a tangent a little bit, but it's amazing how people find their backbone, their conscience, and their morality the moment they're away from it, right? Whatever.
Betsy, do you have any more questions? Because I'm tapped at the moment.
Well, just a little bit about, the next time you're going to be on is going to be 2 weeks from tonight. And,
Okay.
hopefully the other candidate. So what is that whole approach? Because maybe people that watch this don't know, the campaign with the four of you and what you've been doing and why.
Is that for me or Kevin?
Yeah.
You're in the campaign, it's for you.
Okay. So the next thing that we got going on, we do have a town hall that's going to happen at the Triple Oak Wine Cellar, and that's next Thursday, and it starts at 6 o'clock. And then we have one more town hall scheduled for the end of the month at the 20 on the 24th, and that is going to be in Glide at the Glide Community Center, again at 6 o'clock. I will note that one of my other competitors, David Hamerson, him and his wife are working to put together a no kidding debate. And that is scheduled to be on, talk about something else while I look it up.
Well, speaking of debates, I think the League of Women Voters has sponsored kind of like a county commissioner forum.
Yes.
At least committed to putting on, and if they don't show up, they don't show up. But I think that's more of a detriment to the incumbents than anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're shooting for March 28th, and it'll be at the high school at the Rose Theater. I don't think that's official yet, so I wouldn't, make plans and show up. But I know that's what they're working towards. And Kevin, do you know what day that League of Women Voters one was?
Let me check my email. I don't know any of the specifics, and I don't know if I should say out loud to just because it's their inner workings, and I've kind of been
Yeah,
given
no,
privy.
understand.
But
I just found the email with the invite, but I
yeah,
understand what you're saying. We'll not
yeah,
disclose. We'll let them.
exactly. But because I still think it's a working date for them, but I will send you the information that I have, and that I do know that the League of Women Voters is going to have some sort of forum this year.
I welcome a debate. I really, that's the problem with a lot of our politics is that we do have these one-sided discussions. And I'm not unreasonable. There may be all kinds of great reasons for why they did some of the things they did. Being a bully is not, there's no excuse for that. But some of the other things, maybe the Champagne Creek or maybe I don't know, the landslide seems impossible to explain away or even the getting into the Winchester's Bay septic system. But you never know. It's important that we hear the other side. There may be very good reasons for why they did what they did. So I welcome a debate for sure.
Well, in that case, before we start looking towards the end credits of this very fruitful podcast, and thank you for being our first guest on this particular segment, is would you be willing to debate one of them on the show, regardless? Somebody that, say, Virgil Osborne stood
Yeah.
up and said, I would be willing to have a conversation, chew it out online.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe if we frame it just a little bit better, I'd like to have a real conversation, like really understand where they're coming from and why they made the decisions they made. Like I said, maybe they can explain it away, or maybe it really was for whatever. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that, but everybody should have the opportunity, and we shouldn't be in our own echo chambers because you never learn and you never grow if you don't at least, come to the other side with an open heart and an open mind. So, yes, I would debate anybody or have a conversation with anybody at any time because I don't know everything in the world. And it's always possible that I'm wrong, and I'm willing to learn.
At least you're one of the people who is strong enough to admit that, because I know from experience that we've got elected leaders that won't back down from anything regardless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and
My
the
good.
part of the lack of transparency, though, does have to go to the lap of the county commissioners.
Yeah.
Okay, they actually do control the ability to disclose what they want. Because I'm going to tell you this, and I tell people when I do legal education stuff for lay people, that the law is a minimum requirement of behavior. It does not mean you
Yeah.
can't do more. And so, that's the one thing we forget, and that's the one thing I think that we should demand of our elected officials. The information can, in this day and age, it can be overtly put, it's already on electronic format. It's already in electronic format, just to
Right.
be in a user-friendly, searchable way to find the information. And
Yeah.
that's really, if they started doing that with all these things they want to propose, they might have found, they used to have public comments in county commission. So I hope the one thing all of you guys do is commit to re-allowing that general public comment section. But they shut it down because people did not understand some things. And they
Yeah.
would be accusatory, right? But that's kind of your own fault if you're not being upfront with people, particularly that when you're elected to office,
Right. Right.
there's a right, they have a right to question, just like you did or other people have done over the years that ended up getting us no public comment section because they got mad about the way the people were approaching it. And it could be that people were asserting things that weren't true, that they imagined, but they have to take some responsibility for the fact that they allowed people to imagine shit because they didn't overtly
Right.
say, no, this is what's going on, and
Right.
from the get-go. And that's
Yeah.
true with everybody.
If there's no story, then you can make up any story.
Well, and I
Right.
think that the most surprising indicator of that, Betsy, is that, it's not only Democrats and independents running against all the county commissioners, it's even a lot of Republicans have even stood up to all the, the county commissioners. I think it's only really Tom Kress that has like three people running against him, and he's the lowest number. That's still a high number. And it just still goes to your point that everybody has been all ran on incumbency. And even when they haven't, the last competitive election I actually saw in Douglas County was when Tom Kress was elected back forever ago. And the most significant part about it is remembering Alex Scarlatos dropped out and then hearing all the
Yeah,
rumors that spread around the bars when I was finally able to get in and saying, oh, he dropped out for this reason. Oh, what did he get? And then a couple of years later, he's running against Val Hoyle. So you've always,
yeah,
it's like, I'm not saying anything that I don't want to be labeled as. I don't want to be
right.
somebody who's a shit starter without the facts. You know what I mean? I need the facts before I want to say anything because I want to be in the right. But when you
Yeah,
hear everything, it's like, come on, dude. What I don't have to know I don't have to be a fireman to know which way the wind blows. What is it?
yeah,
Something like that.
yeah, yeah, something like that.
I
Yeah,
think I think
it's
we're upsetting my cat in the background, but I do want to remind people that Dan Loomis is
mhm,
actually at the middle of the shit show that really is
mhm,
caused by that patronage, if you will, or that deal making. Because I do remember the election, and I was very, the appointment, where he became there. And I'm not saying that he did anything wrong with the election he's being sued around or anything,
right.
but I do know that he was the least qualified person to apply. There was two people who had worked in the county clerk's election division office for a long time, highly skilled, one of whom was recommended by the retiring um, county elected official, who is a Republican, by the way. And she was really one of the best public servants I've ever encountered in all the years that I've dealt with public servants.
Yeah,
And she made the recommendation, and they ignored her recommendation and gave it to Loomis, who happened to have been running against somebody and might
right.
have won. And he drops out, and lo and behold, they appoint him to replace Patty Hitt. That is documented proof. So you can assume what happened. And I'm going to say, if you're a betting person, you can't ignore the fact that people who were qualified to be clerks were not given that job. Either one of the
Yeah,
the two people that were really well qualified. And that's a functionary administrative job to make sure we follow the law and elections are done fairly. That should not be a partisan gift. And that's really what it appeared to be. And
yeah.
so
Yeah, if I looked into my crystal ball, Betsy, again, this is just me spitballing, so take it for what it is. I would bet that the head of the ONC counties is probably getting ready to step down, and maybe one of our commissioners will take that spot, and then Loomis will be appointed to that commissioner spot if he wins. That's my prediction.
well, thanks for stepping forward. And the one thing that I did mention is that the other three people that you're running with, or that you're showing up in town hall was, hopefully we'll be able to join us in 2 weeks. But if anybody wants to, write you questions, what they contact you through via your website, you'll
Yeah,
answer the questions here or in some other way.
yeah. Yeah, so one of the things we're doing at all of our town halls is we're actually collecting written questions because some people, they don't feel comfortable standing up in a crowd or talking, or they want to have in-depth conversations, right? So we are taking those written questions. We've been looking for a little bit of a forum to be able to answer those questions. Lately, we've been just kind of emailing them back and letting them know what we thought, but we want to make that public. And this would be a great forum to be able to read those questions out loud and then give our answers.
Of course, we're trying to really highlight Southern Oregon politics. And besides Douglas County, we might be thinking of sending an invitation to Josephine County, where I know that there's also a couple of contentious elections down there. So we would love to have as many people on to, help out their candidacies as we can.
This was fun. I enjoyed this. I was at our town halls, we haven't, because there's so many of us, we don't get to really expand and really talk. So sorry for dominating the conversation. I think I've had a lot that I wanted to say that finally came out, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
That was the point. And on Sunday, on the regular Sundays SOPP, we're gonna have Lori and Nick, and then at some point also then have Shane and Kathy. That's her name, right? In that from
Yeah.
Bridgeport, probably see if she's interested in being on the show. So we cover the county commissioners and actually anybody else who's in the county commission race who wants to be on SOPP, either this and particularly on one of the Friday nights, they can do that.
So
They can contact us.
that is a clear invitation to the incumbents who I know are going to be watching tonight's video that we would love to have you on tonight or any night.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great point, Kevin, is because, if there was something that I talked about that is just dead wrong or is inaccurate, even in the smallest detail, then they have the opportunity to come over here and correct the record. So that's I appreciate you giving them that opportunity.
All right, I'm done. Thanks.
Right on. Are we going to stay on and talk at all? Or are we good?